If we have a look at our reducer here, we see that we have all these different cases, incrementing, adding, and so on. Delete, store result, all these things. And of course, I emphasize that the identifiers we're looking for here in the reducer are the identifiers we should use in our container components, in our application where we want to dispatch these actions. We do so, of course, but there always is the danger of us simply adding a tiny typo and searching for it for hours because we don't find it. Therefore, it is a good practice to outsource your action types into constants you can use in your application so that you always just import a constant and eliminate the danger of mistyping. This is especially useful as your application grows. If you only have 2 types of actions you dispatch, you might not need that, but for bigger applications, definitely add it. For this, I'll add a new file to my store folder and I'll name it actions.js. And in there, we can simply export a constant, which typically give the same name as the identifier will have. So you could have a constant which is increment. And the value we assign is just that string identifier. So we just stored that string in a constant now, which we export. And we do that for all our actions. So we also have decrement here, and the identifier is the same. Now, theoretically, name of the constant and identifier don't have to match, but it is a good practice. Then here we have the same for add, and of course for subtract, like this. And of course also for store result, which we also then use as the identifier, and delete result, like this. So now we have this extra file where we export all these actions. This now allows us to go into the reducer and import the actions from there. We can now simply import everything from a given file and store it in some JavaScript object, maybe action types, from /actions. Action types now is a JavaScript object which has all these properties here, or all these constants here, I should say, as properties. So now here we can check for case action types dot, and now here that would be increment. And the same, of course, for decrement and so on. The huge advantage of this approach simply is we're now importing our constants here, and if we mistype a constant name, we'll actually get an error by our IDE or by that build process. If we store and save everything, I'll get an error. Export increment not found. So I have to fix my typo to have a working application again. This is why you use this approach. So I'll replace all my hard-coded strings here with the action types I'm importing. So subtract, add, and so on, to eliminate the danger of mistyping here. So action types, store result, and of course also action types, delete result, so that all are replaced. And then I do the same where I dispatch them. It of course doesn't make any sense to still have hard-coded values here because I could still mistype. So I'll simply now import my action types here too. So import everything as action types, and this name is up to you. You can name this object whatever you want. And now I simply move up to the store folder, to the actions.js file, and now I use my action types here too for dispatching. So here the type is action types increment, decrement, and so on. And therefore we're now always referring to that property, to the constants we are exporting in the actions file, and hence we can't mess up by mistyping or having different identifiers, because now we have only one place where we set up and store our identifiers, and that is in this actions.js file. So now with this adjusted, the application should still work as before. As you can see, I can still add and delete results and change my counter. But now we eliminated one danger, one potential source of errors. Therefore, outsourcing your action types into a separate file from which you then import is a good practice, especially as your application grows, but it doesn't have to grow that much for this to make sense.